Good afternoon. We are here today at the Win and Workforce Summit. We are the last session of the day, and we are in the cyber and technology track. To those of you joining online, thanks for being here. Thanks for joining us. We appreciate it. We have a great panel discussion for you today, and we look forward to having a really good conversation. And so we have some folks online that'll be asking questions, folks in the room asking questions. Please feel free to do so. We have some housekeeping for today as well. And so first, before we get to that, we have our four I was going to say contestants, but we have three panelists and me, your moderator, Jesse. Immediately to my left, we have David Dockstad, the president of ISG. To his left, we have Michelle Lavalley, right? Lavalley?
Or you can just call me Lovely.
Lovely. Michelle Lovely, the CEO of the Children's Home Society. And then Natalie Eisenberg, a partner and CEO at ClickRate. And so we're going to be having some time at the end of the session for you to do some Q&A. I'm trying to watch onto Facebook, too, to see what questions are coming up in the live chat. And feel free to have a conversation with us today. We really look forward to doing that with you. So first, I want to go over what's happening in this session. So we are understanding the new tools our community leaders are using today to improve their own professional skills. We appreciate the generational differences, preferences, and needs for professional development today. We're going to learn where our leaders are making financial investment for their own professional and for their employees. We're going to learn how our current leaders are disrupting the traditional milestones for professional advancement and what this means for the future of our workforce. So, we're going to start with introductions. David, who are you? Tell us a little bit about yourself, your company, your employees, the makeup of them.
Absolutely. Thanks, Jesse. So David Dockstad, president of ISG. We are an architecture, engineering, planning, and environmental services firm. We have 10 offices in Minnesota, Iowa, Wisconsin, and South Dakota. 325 professionals, all employee owners. So we have structural, mechanical, electrical, environmental scientists, architects, landscape architects, interior designers, and plenty that I have forgotten. Our leadership team, we consist of 3 outside board members, 5 internal board members. We have a growth and strategy team, which is kind of our executive team. We just don't like to call it that. We have an alignment team, which handles our culture and our employees. Then our operations team really focuses on efficiency and things like that. Myself, I'm a Northwest Iowa farm kid. I got a civil engineering degree from Iowa State University. Started in our Algona office with Keel & Pyre, actually, a firm that was a merger in 2012. I came into ISG as a part of that merger in 2012. 2013, 2 weeks after I got engaged to my wife, I told her that the CEO wanted us to move to Storm Lake. So moved to Storm Lake, talked her into that. Started in our Storm Lake office as the manager of our public works department. Did that for about a year. Then eventually took over that office and ran that office for about 6 years, the last of which I also started managing our Algona office, so managed those both at the same time. Then I did get my wife to move once again to Sioux Falls and opened up our Sioux Falls operation in February of 2018. Myself and 2 others. We're at about 15 employees today in our Sioux Falls operation, so in about 2 years we've been grown from 3 to 15. Continue to grow as a firm. As I had indicated, I was one of our 19 shareholders that decided in January of 2017 that we wanted to take care of our ownership structure and make sure that we were geared up for growth and diversification moving forward. So we handed the whole company over to everybody. So we switched to 100% ESOP in January of 2017 and haven't looked back. I think that's a absolutely great model for us. So it's a little bit about myself and my organization.
Thanks, David. Michelle, same question for you. Tell us about yourself, your experience, and your organization that you serve.
You bet, Jesse. It's great to be here. So I'm the CEO of the Children's Home Society of South Dakota. Just been there just a year. And what we do is through psychiatric residential treatment for kiddos in Sioux Falls and in Rapid City. We have about 6 different kinds of programs under the umbrella of Children's Home Society. The first is the residential psychiatric, where we have about 100 kids. They go to school full-time, and they go to school year-round with us, so we have 2 really wonderful little private schools as well. We serve people from across the whole state. In fact, every county we've had kids. We're also involved, though, in community-based education, where we go out and talk about how to stop the cycle of abuse and sexual exploitation of children. We do adoption and foster care, and we also run Sioux Falls' only domestic violence shelter that serves Minnehaha and Lincoln County. So lots of different things going on. We have about 350 employees throughout the state, and obviously there's lots of therapists and social workers in terms of the types of folks. It's a wonderful mission. It's the oldest nonprofit social services organization in the state of South Dakota, very financially stable, and I have to say I love, after being in lots of different kinds of businesses, I think I've found my capstone career, I call it, my capstone course, very much about the mission of really empowering and helping folks at probably some of the worst times of their life. Before I did that, I had my own company called the La Valley Group, where I did strategy for mostly working with boards and their senior teams to help them figure out their vision and their competitive advantage, and then to help them execute with their critical initiatives. I ran for Lieutenant Governor with Billy Sutton 2 years ago, which was supposed to be my capstone course, but I had to find something else. But it was close, 3%, 11,000 votes, but who's counting, right? We did. Anyway, before that, I've lived across the country. I think we've moved 14 times, but I've always been on marketing strategy, customer experience kinds of work. Back in South Dakota, when I moved back from Chicago, I worked for Northwestern Energy, and then was recruited to USD to go and run their new, implement a new brand, and then got recruited to go to Avera to lead their strategy and marketing and communications, and then I felt, boy, I better do something international, so I went to Raven and led their global sales and marketing in 67 different countries, which was amazing. So I've had an interesting career, but I'm really enjoying what I'm doing now, and anxious to share with you some of the things that we're doing for recruitment, workforce development, and leadership.
Thank you, Michelle. And Natalie, tell us about ClickRain and your experience and your background.
I will, but just for a moment, I'm a little bit overtaken because, Michelle, you have always been just an inspiration to me coming up in the marketing world and in this industry. So
I love her.
This is neat to be able to sit alongside you and talk on this panel today.
Well, thanks, Natalie.
You're welcome. Thank you. My name is Natalie Eisenberg, and I am CEO of ClickRain. We are a people-first digital agency, and some might think, well, if you're digital, are you really people-first? Yes, we are. We work really hard to not only deliver digital solutions that perform well, but that the teams that we work with and the companies that we work with can understand them and apply them and learn from them. So we're people first in that way, but we're also people first in a lot of ways internally in our culture and with our team. So I look forward to sharing more about that today. Personally speaking, I grew up here in Sioux Falls. I'm a Sioux Falls girl, and I found my way to USD after high school, and was kind of a generalist, studying a lot of different things, not really gravitating one way or another, until one professor at USD said one day after a PR class, you're really good at this. And that stuck with me and kind of carved my road down the path of marketing. And I eventually came to know Paul Schiller, who was one of the founders of Lawrence & Schiller, and another great Sioux Falls marketing company. And I worked there for 12 years out of college. Had a chance to work with a number of awesome clients, learn a ton, and eventually one of my former clients, Paul Tenhaken, asked me if I wanted a job. And I came over to ClickRain almost 5 years ago and have been with the company ever since, CEO for almost 4 years.
Wow. We have a great panel here today, and I should introduce myself. My name is Jesse, and I serve as the Executive Director of the Lincoln and Minnehaha County Economic Development Associations. we serve the rural communities around Sioux Falls and their economic development efforts. And so as I was preparing for this panel, I had a little bit of starstruck. We have some amazing executives here to my left, and I'm a little intimidated by everybody here. So I look forward to having a conversation with you at the same table. So Natalie, first question for you. How do you balance your professional development with the requirements and needs of the people that you serve?
Well, first and foremost, I have the mentality that I'm always learning. I don't know everything, and with the team that I have, with such technical knowledge, I'm always, every single day, learning something new from them, and I'm interested. I'm interested to know what's happening in the industry, and they're really the ones that can teach me that now. And so I learn every day from the team, and I also work really hard to understand what their learning needs are and where they're getting to a point where they want to know more, need to know more in their work, and then it's my job to help bring the resources together to make that happen. So I'm always learning alongside my team, and on my own time, I am a real sponge for information, and however, I am not one for long form content. So practically speaking, I like articles, I like more short form content and I do read books, but I skim. I'll be honest, I skim a lot, and I get a lot of little nuggets that way, and that feeds my personal development as well.
So Michelle, same question for you. How do you identify, the way you blend your professional development with your employees, and how do you work in education and leadership in that way?
Yeah, like Natalie, I think I'm learning right alongside my employees, actually. But one thing that we discovered at Children's Home Society is that leadership development was sort of ignored for a long time. In social services, often there's not the kind of dollars that are needed to invest in your employees. After we did our survey, I realized that was really important to folks. Plus, we have a young workforce, and oftentimes you've heard the story, you're good in your job, well, you get promoted to be the supervisor, but we just put you right in that supervisor job. Mm-hmm. And maybe you were great at being a residential treatment counselor, but you're just not born knowing how to lead. So I am amazed and so proud of the board of Children's Home Society. They allowed me to actually do something really big first 2 months, and we created Children's Home Society University. If you do research, I'm sure you've heard of companies having a university internally, which is completely customized curriculum for you. We hired a company called Sagency, which is remarkable in Fargo, North Dakota, and twice a month, the organization, if you supervise people, we have 67 supervisors, if you supervise people, you're part of this cohort that goes on for 3 years, and it is a deep dive into leadership development. I have to tell you guys, at 62 years of age, I have never had this kind of self-assessment into my own leadership skills ever. We start by taking a very in-depth, you've all probably taken DISC and all those kinds of things, but the one they use is Trimetrics, and it goes into 5 very in-depth parts of who you are. Oh my gosh. So can you imagine being in an organization and being able to see all of the leaders and what drives them, their driving forces and all that? This has been such a tool. But yesterday we had our third class, our third deep dive, and it's into trust, the bedrock of organizational health and results. Because it turns out if you don't have deep trust in an organization, you can't move the ball. And it was just amazing. Unfortunately, we're doing it by Zoom, so we're divided into groups of about 33 or so. But we see everybody. There's deep homework. And you can tell that people are really engaging because it is all about us and our industry. Other modules are like navigating change, creating a culture of performance and accountability. I mean, stuff that you'd see I went to Northwestern University in Chicago and did my MBA there. And I mean, for me, that was world-class education, and this is really world-class. So I have to say, we're repeating our employee engagement survey just this week, and I am just so hopeful that the scores are going to go up for engaging and helping folks become better leaders in an organization that's really tough. So I got to tell you, that is my passion project, and love. I could talk about it for the whole hour if you're interested.
Sounds like another discussion. So David, at ISG, how do you develop leaders, and how do you strengthen those that are looking to grow in their capabilities?
Absolutely. I think that there's different things that we look at, and we use StrengthsFinder quite a bit and we have everybody do it, and we have everybody that we even interview, and interns and things like that all go through that StrengthsFinder. And I think it's how we use the information. So what we really articulate to folks is not to come away from that and say, oh, here are my weaknesses, right? And these are the things that I have to change. I think so many people really focus on what they're, in a sense, bad at or not passionate about. And then they put all of that effort into really trying to bring, maybe they're a D at that, and they bring it up to a C, instead of focusing on the Bs and taking them to As. And I think that's so empowering to identify, okay, what am I not that great at, and what team members can I really utilize to support me in that particular area. And I think that provides opportunities to others. I mean, you get to focus on what you're good at, what you're passionate about at. And then you really get to use your team members to fill in the things and support you from other areas that you're not so strong. And I think that's just something that really guides us. I'm significance, achiever, competition, focus, and futuristic. And I know them, and we all know ours. But I think that also is something to really look back and say, why did I approach this situation in this fashion? Well, then you look at your strengths, and then you go, oh yeah, that's because significance is up there. I do probably want a pat on the back when I'm done with it. So I think it's just interesting.
You're doing a great job.
Thanks, Jesse. But that's something.
Way to
that
go,
we use.
David.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm a woo, by the way, if you can't tell.
Yep, that makes some sense. So, yeah.
Michelle, that doesn't surprise me. I'm a woo as well. I can see the
You're
woo.
probably all woos up
I
here.
bet so.
Are you
And
a
so
woo?
in
I'm a
some
woo
way.
wannabe.
You can hang out with us. That's okay, Natalie. So David, we talk about generations a lot, and I think I focus on this because I'm a millennial, and my parents are both beginning boomers, right? My dad's like 74. And so, what do you think's changed in executive leadership today compared with, say, our parents' generation?
Absolutely. When you bring it up in that generational sense, it really takes me back to, it would have been about 2015-ish, and I was going to a conference with our CEO at the time, and I was confused of why he wanted to take me. But he also put me in the first session that I went to was a CEO roundtable. I was clearly not a CEO, and at that point in time, we were sitting there, and I saw the topic was millennials. So I thought there was going to be a lot of different strategy. It ended up being a bunch of dudes sitting around a table whining about millennials, and I was like, that's not us. I mean, this is a competitive advantage, and we really he was doing it on purpose. He was totally putting me in that to tell me this is our industry, and this is what they think of you. And I just took that and went, oh my gosh, this is such an opportunity to embrace. So we're engineering in especially when I recruit some of our more creative folks, our architects and our landscape architects. I always have to explain to them, we are not our normal engineering firm that is very linear in your career path. Engineers can fall into that prey and train by a spreadsheet, but how that in the typical sense is you're an engineer and it's very structured. So you have 4 years, then you get to sit for your PE. Your 4 years, you start managing projects. Your 4 years, you're a client manager. Your 4 years, and then you start managing people. And somewhere along the way, you rose up this path and you found that you hate the next position that you get to. And that's so frustrating. Instead, why don't we look at what people are good at and say, hey, do you like dealing with clients? If you don't like dealing with clients, don't go up to that ladder or go in a different direction. In identifying how a person's career path can fit their strengths and what they want, their passions, I think is a big part of our organization. So our average age is 36. Our industry is 47. I think that is a competitive advantage for us, but it's also our biggest issue, because if we don't do a good job of growing and creating opportunities for folks, we are training our best competition, and that is not what we want to do. So,
Yeah, Natalie, same question for you. You know, I'm sure you work with a lot of young folks, being a digital firm. What's your experience? What do you think has changed?
Well, so I've been in the workforce for 15 or so years, probably more. Um, but I have had a chance to work with leaders that are from the boomer generation, and I've been able to now lead as a Gen Xer, and work with a lot of millennials and now Gen Y. And so I kind of find myself as like a middle child in all of this, and trying to draw out strengths from every generation and really realizing that there are positives from every generation, and encouraging that we look at each other with that mindset. So I guess the thing that stands out to me as something that is a little different now from when I started working is this idea of sort of whole person development. And instead of simply professional development in the workplace, you're really working with people more holistically and realizing that their personal development really affects their professional development. And realizing that if a person, if we can create an environment at work that can propel them to their home in a positive way, and then their home can be, or their personal life can be such that it propels them back to work, like that's the energy that we want to have. And that concept comes to me from work that our company has done with Think 3D. So I don't want to poach that. That's a really great concept that we use a lot now, propelling people from home to work and from work to home. So at times I think I've heard comments from some of my more veteran staff that some of the work that we're doing on this whole person development is kind of soft and kind of cushy and not so sure that it really belongs in the workplace. But I think it's just more of getting used to this idea that it's really the whole person that comes to work, and the best whole people perform the best work.
Yeah, so Michelle, we have two for-profit leaders here, and then you work for a nonprofit. Do you feel what they've said is anything different than what you would say as a nonprofit leader?
Not at all. And I've worked across the spectrum in different organizations, but I think what people want is know me, see me, be who you really are at home and at work, like you said. I think that when I first got to Children's Home, I said, I'm going to meet everybody. I'm going to have a one-on-one with everybody. And before COVID, I got to 311 out of 350. And I got to tell you, boy, for any of you that ever has a role like that, it takes you so quickly up the learning curve because you know exactly what's going on. And throughout my career, I've always said, but what do you want to do besides this, beyond this? What's your life like? People want you to know them personally. And I have to say that I think that makes such a difference. I asked, kind of what the pain points are in their life, and we have a whole bunch of young folks that work with us right out of school, first job, in fact, working with kids, and their pain points are their student loans. I mean, it's killing folks. And so, you know what I realized? In a high turnover place, let's do something that matters. So you work for me for 30 days, I'm going to pay your student loan. You don't have to ever pay me back. You don't have to stay there for any number of years. I'm going to pay directly to your student loan company. I mean, wow! As a difference for retention. If we did that, would you stick with us a couple of years? Well, it started in April and it's working so far. So I think we have to do things. I mean, what's different in executive leadership today? I think you've got to be really creative. You got to be creative and think about what matters to people. If it's flex time, if you want to work from home, you know what? That's okay. There's days that is just fine. So I think the concept of servant leadership is alive and well in all of our businesses.
Yeah. So Michelle, I just kind of want to follow up here. How did your executive team and your board, how have they handled this culture transition under your leadership? How has this been accepted?
I'm recruited to companies that need change and transformation, and that's any personality profile I take. I love change. And not everybody's like that. I mean, that's the good and bad in me, because you know what? After I hate maintenance, let me fix it, but I don't want to stick around and just keep doing the same old, same old. So I have to constantly be reinventing. And we're working on something from Children's Home University called RIP. It's a way to give people feedback. You know how you rip off a Band-Aid, you do it quick. So if I'm going to tell you something good about yourself, or if I have to give you some constructive feedback, we're realizing everybody's so nice in social services that they don't talk to you in an open way. So here's the answer to the question. My chief operating officer, you have to give once a week on our one-on-ones, you have to say something constructively using this technique to your boss. That's hard. So my C-suite, COO said to me, hey, Michelle, you know what? She has all the business unit leaders reporting to her, and she said, hey, you know, you're implementing a lot of change. I mean, a lot of change. And the impact of that is sometimes it won't stick because people feel overwhelmed. And so the path forward, I said, you know what? This next thing that I was going to do, which was quarterly goal setting, we'll wait on that until we can get caught up. So I got to tell you, the board loves the change because they wanted some significant change. That the team, social services, doesn't move very fast. And so I have to say to myself, stop, just wait. Just because you're so ginned up to get to the next thing, let's slow that pace of change. And that is completely foreign to me. And I mean, this could be my therapy group because I'm telling you that I every day have to say, stop, reassess. Is this the right thing to do?
Okay, HR folks, therapists at the time. Does that sound pretty familiar with what you do in your job, part-time therapy? So David, we had a really good conversation earlier about professional growth and involvement in your community. You know, how do you support your employees' desire to grow professionally and keeping them in that track you kind of talked about?
Yeah, absolutely. I think our best leaders are that truly desire to be empathetic leaders, to understand individuals, and it's been interesting, even recruiting folks that have said, I really like to be involved in the community, but at the same time, you know, I need to get my work done. And it's like, absolutely, you gotta weigh both. But some folks don't. I think some organizations get confused that their involvement in the community is a benefit to you. I mean, I know it's something that you're not sitting there and identifying that business development, but you should be. You should be identifying that people growing relationships inside of a community is gonna only do good for you. And if you support them in that endeavor, they're gonna do great things for you. So I think that's something that you just really need to look at as an organization, is how do I instead empower them to do more? How do I empower them to have more handshakes, have more coffee, go out and meet new people, and it will come around. It's the things that really establishing those relationships with individuals are the things that come back into projects eventually. You just need to really breathe that in there.
Do you think that helps with retention?
I for sure. Yeah, I mean, I think folks understand then that you're really committed to their career growth. And if you are pushing them and saying, hey, what are the organizations that you want to get involved with? And how can we help you do more for them? How do we help you get a board seat? How do we help you make more influence, make more impact? I think they really start to realize that it's really a true living, breathing organization that you're a part of. And what's our greatest thing that we're trying to do? Impact our community.
Yeah.
Yeah. And by the way, we get projects along the way.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Yep. So.
Yeah, Natalie, same question for you. How do you support your employees to start to grow professionally and get involved in the community if they so choose, and is that important?
Very important, very much a priority to us. When we say people first in our company, that's not just inside the walls, that's outside the walls. And so really trying to understand what people's passions are and support them in their passions. And that could look like a lot of things. That could look like volunteering in their child's classroom. That could look like being involved in chamber things or association things. That could look like helping out at LSS with the Center for New Americans. I mean, really aligning opportunities with people's passions is important. And then any benefit to the company is, I think, secondary. Benefiting our people first, our team first is the priority, and then and those things do come around, because then the activities they're doing there, they're getting to try new things with other teams. They're maybe building programs in whatever they're working on. They're exercising other skills outside of our walls, and I think that comes back to us, as well as the relationships that they build.
So I want to transition to some more personal leadership discussion, and we talked about how we support our employees and how what programs are in place in our companies. But how do you grow professionally? And some people use books and reading as an example in their leadership growth. Michelle, what are you reading right now? Does it apply to leadership growth, and what are your thoughts on it?
Oh, God, you know what? My life is too much nonfiction, so I'm always reading fiction. But I'm reading a couple right now. One is, I mentioned before, it's called The 12-Week Year, Get More Done in 12 Weeks Than Others Do in 12 Months, which is by Brian Moore, and it's probably not a great book for me to keep on my desk, because people go, oh, great, now you want us to get in, we're going to get everything we're supposed to get done in 12 weeks, and I thought, oh my God, I am probably going too fast, but it's really just a framework for goal setting. Instead of doing it once a year, you do it every quarter, because the world changes, right? And so I really love that, but I'm also reading one called Evil Geniuses, The Unmasked, The Unmaking of America by Kurt Anderson, and it's really for my book club. They're pretty intellectual, and it really just talks about how we think we're really innovative, but how innovation in some things perhaps hasn't been as radical as it was in the 60s. It kind of takes us back to when our country was founded. But my really fun one is called Squeeze Me by Carl Hyacin, and it's set in Florida, and it's always about the crazy characters there. And this one, a socialite, a 79-pound woman, is eaten by a python.
Wow.
And it makes you laugh out loud. I'm not kidding you guys. I never laugh at a book, but if you read anything by Carl Hyacin, it will just make you laugh. So everything's electronic, so I can go back and forth between the three, depending on the mood.
David, same question for you. Well, there's an interesting on the first book that you were talking about in the 12 weeks. I think a part, and we've had this discussion on our leadership team, is sometimes creating seasons. And so that you can, it feels like you can get to somewhere and you get that win, like, yes. That's awesome. And I think that's an interesting take. The main book that I've been reading lately is Little Blue Truck. Reading it often. I have 4 kids under 4, and I was giving our firm update, and I actually said that. They said, "What book are you reading?" I was like, "Oh, I'm reading it over and over again." And but I think that's to be honest with folks and say that in our firm update is exactly who we are. Yeah. Is to say, what am I reading? I'm focusing on family too, because I got to keep them happy as well. But one book for business book that I'm reading is High Speed Company. It's by Jason Jennings. And it kind of explains how quickly you need to adapt and change, because everything's always changing. Very applicable right now, right? So I'm reading that, but he's also the author of The Reinventers. And I think it's a great read. I absolutely love it. It has one of my favorite quotes, and I know my team knows my favorite quote in the book. If your desire to be comfortable is greater than your need to embrace change, it's probably time to call it a day, wrap things up, and put the business into hungry hands. Mm-hmm. And I have it plastered on my wall, and it's a reminder that you need to embrace change and not be scared. And I think that's something some folks get nervous about. There's a complacency that you get to a leadership position and, I've made it. Oh, no, you haven't. No, it's just started. And to have that model, I think, is really what drives us. We were having the same discussion with our leadership team, and we all said, I think what really brings us together is the fact that our biggest fear is not failure, it's boredom. And I think that's something that really pulls us together more than anything.
Wow. What about you, Natalie? What are you reading right now?
Bite-sized nuggets. No, I have a book right now that I'm going through, and it's, so I've done the strength finders, I've done the DISC test, of course, and now the Enneagram system has emerged. So reading a book about that, The Road Back to You, it's what it's called. Really interesting, a whole nother take on personality profiles. And then I read Harvard Business Review really religiously, both the hard copy and then I just read articles as they are kind of floated to me through the various channels. So those are the two things I'm reading actively right now.
So what draws you to the Harvard Business Review?
Well, it's probably going back to weaknesses a little bit. I didn't go to business school. I don't have an MBA. I have a Master's of Arts in communication. And so the hard skills of business I've had to learn practically. And the language of business, accounting and finance, as Michelle talked about just a week ago, is something that I've had to learn hands-on. So I read Harvard Business Review to hear from business leaders about the challenges and the successes they've had, and oftentimes it aligns with things that I want to learn that I find are weaknesses for me.
So, Natalie, comparing to what you've read, I mean, how does that compare to what you've learned along the way at ClickGrain? Your experience as a leader, as you're maybe trying to make changes here and there, has it been pretty much status quo as what you read, or is it different in application?
One thing I love about the publication is that I really oftentimes find parallels in what other companies are experiencing and what we're experiencing. And, you know, I mean, there's a lot of businesses out there and a lot of business leaders out there, and why not share our experiences? You know, if I'm going through it, more than likely somebody else has too. And that's why Harvard Business Review really resonates with me and I can also search by topic really easily, and they just have a robust library of content.
So I want to talk about mentoring, and there's been a really great initiative started here in the city of Sioux Falls called the Sioux52 Mentoring Initiative. If you haven't had a chance to learn about it, if you Google it, it'll pop up. You know, Michelle, in your career, what type of mentoring have you had, and how has that impacted you?
You know, I was really lucky to have great mentors early. My first career was in banking in Colorado, and I think I sought them out too because I wanted to learn as much as I could about banking and business development. But I really made a commitment in my career to really mentor young women because I saw so often how they didn't have the traditional mentorship opportunities. And even just a couple of years ago, I talk about Natalie. People on all the boards I was on would say, well, where are all the female CEOs? And I say, I don't know, where are they? Why don't you promote them, right? So Natalie was one I could point to as a female CEO. Look around. You know, you don't find it in health system, you don't find it in banking. You do, there is one in banking here, but I think we had not our fair share. So I became very active with MB, and I had a mentee every year in the leadership program, and they did really well. I just did a special for, I was president of Downtown Rotary when we started talking about we need to focus on one thing a year rather than all these different service projects. Let's do one thing. At the same time, Paul Tenhaken was coming into office, and he wanted to do one thing, and it turned out we both settled on mentoring, to be the city of mentors. There's 1,600 kids last year in our school district that were identified as needing a mentor that didn't have one. So those kinds of stories really, really propelled us. So KSFY, or Dakota News Now, agreed to do the Rotary Mentoring Moment for us. So I'm engaged in finding folks to talk about their mentoring relationships. And I was the first one a couple months ago, and Brianne Manor, who runs Zeal, was one of the young women that I mentored. And she's just done super well, and we talked about that. So I think I probably had 15 or so women that I've mentored, and I just encourage anybody to do that. We're just encouraging folks, and if you want to be a mentor, if you call, if you want to be one, or if you need one, you call 211. The helpline is there, and they will totally set you up. We're trying to get 5,200 mentors this year for Sioux52.
That's right.
That is a commercial.
That's right. So look it up. It's a great program. That's a shameless plug on
I was hoping I could
252.
do that.
Good job. Thank you for doing that, Michelle. It was
You bet,
fantastic.
it's
And
fun.
honestly, it's a great feature on Dakota News Now. I encourage you all to take a few moments
Yeah, it was great.
to watch it. David, same question for you. How has mentoring impacted your life?
Absolutely. Great question. I think it's different, but I think there's also there's professional mentors, but there's also the mentors that you have along the way. It's the bringing back, starting on a farm, hard work ethic, and those are mentors that stick with those mentorship opportunities, and that influence will stick with you for the rest of your life. The coaches that you had along the way, that established, workout programs in the morning, and it provided discipline that you were up and you were at school at 6 and you were doing things like that. Those things really resonate, and I also would definitely tell you, if you haven't reached out to those folks that have impacted you in your career and said, hey, this has led me to this position because you provided some level of those tools, I would definitely do it, because it's some really great discussions that you'll have, and the feedback is just so cool. But I will say that one of my biggest mentors professionally, he was our CEO until January, and decided that at 50 he was too old to be the CEO, which is an interesting model. But he really provided me guidance on the opportunities that I was provided. He'd provide me the opportunity and said, you know what, you're going to take something on here, but I will most certainly support you along the way. And I was just dumb enough to say yes a lot of times. But I think that Chad did an unbelievable job to just support me and let me fail, but then pick me back up and help you identify the failure and absolutely correct that action. So that's exactly what I try to do with my folks. I have a habit that I like to eat out lunch regularly. And what I always like to do is keep kind of that hour open on my calendar, that if any of our staff, no matter who it is, if I'm available, book me for lunch. And I don't really love the formal reviews of employees, to be honest. I'd rather just have that hour of, how are you doing? How are things going? What can the organization, what can I do to help influence you in a better fashion? It's probably also because I'm a little bit crazy on my schedule, so I like to pack something into that lunch as well. So, yep.
How about you, Natalie?
Well, I would say that mentoring wasn't really a active concept like it is today when I was newer to career, and so I didn't have a formal mentor. I had people that I really worked closely with, and I wanted to be like them. And then I had, I didn't work with a lot of female leaders, and so, at least not in my business, but that's where I was really always looking out and seeing women business leaders in the community, like Michelle, like Kathy Clark, like Ruth Christopolsky, I could go on, of the women that I just kind of observed from afar on how they handled things, and the class and dignity and just intelligence that they carried themselves with, and that's what drove me a lot. But now there are so many more programs to bring women together, bring people together, and do this more actively, more formally, and in a more labeled way. So I definitely do that with a lot of younger professionals at this time, and also in my company, there's so many people that know more than I do. I oftentimes am saying, will you mentor me on this particular thing? Mentor me on artificial intelligence, would you? Because it's coming fast and they're so knowledgeable. Teach me.
Reverse mentoring
Absolutely.
is a big topic.
Mm-hmm. All directions.
So I think we have some time for some questions from the audience here today. And I have the right slide ready to go. I'm pretty impressed. Any questions from the folks here today for our panelists?
It's funny when you talked about going back and doing the language of business with, which is accounting and finance. I mean, I ran big creative groups of folks, and, you know, they're writers and creatives and designers, and I'd go, you guys, if you want to do more in your career, if you really want to lead, if you really want to drive something, and if you want to convince other people, you got to know what an ROI is and how to talk about it. You got to know how to grow revenue and profitability. And I have to say, in all the companies I've worked at, I've always had at least 2 or 3 folks that, even though the MBA was something that they thought, oh my God, I would hate taking finance and accounting, I think I convinced folks enough to go back and do their MBA. And I have to, that's one thing that I was really, really proud of, is that they were reluctant, very reluctant, but once they took that, they tiptoed in, they all went on and did great things.
I think we just try different formats of teaching and learning. Some people learn better one-on-one, some people learn better on their own time, some people learn better in groups, better by practical means, and so trying to figure out a person's learning style is actually, how do you best learn, is a question that we ask very early on in our relationship with employees.
I think the number one issue sometimes on that is on the learning. For us has been when we've done mergers and acquisitions, and you're creating a big season of change, right? And there's so much to really for them to take in, and totally respect that. You know, they know technically so much. They don't know a ton about our culture, and we try to get that accomplished and conveyed. But we've had a buddy system that we've established when we do our mergers and acquisitions, that really it's up here that you can ask a question that maybe you're really uncomfortable asking somebody else. So it's kind of that counterpart to them that is already in the organization, and it just kind of breaks down a wall that they can start really going, okay, I do want to learn this component, or yeah, it's great that we're going to transition from AutoCAD to Revit or something, you know. But it's a big deal because we really need to continue to pull them into the overall organization. But you need to give them somebody that they can kind of put their defenses down and really have that discussion with.
Other questions? Terry?
Your name David?
Yeah. Yep.
So my name's Terry Liggins, and when I first came to this panel discussion, I figured I'm huge fans of Michelle and Natalie. I was like, this other guy has no chance.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
He's a woo too, I bet.
Oh yeah, I think so.
Big time.
I really got a lot of value out of the whole panel, Michelle and Natalie. Natalie, I love what you said about always learning and staying interested. Michelle, I thank you for just letting us into the university a little bit and some of the things you guys are working on as a team there. There was certainly some takeaways. But David, you really nailed me with some things that you said. I really appreciated how you said allowing people to engage in community is good for business. When people ask about where you work all the time, so let them volunteer a lot. The company's going to come up. I love what you said about putting business into hungry hands. And then this last quote, and this is where my question is at. I believe you said if your need for comfort outweighs your interest or desire for change, then put the business into hungry hands, and that the biggest fear is not failure but boredom. And I think you nailed me there, because I've moved beyond a fear of failure, but I don't like slowing down. But I wonder how you coach people to balance that from a place of potential burnout or being too hard on people. Like, how will you counterbalance this drive of staying busy because you don't want to be bored?
Absolutely. That's a really good question. And it's probably, for our organization, it's a big issue to really hone in and make sure that folks aren't getting burnt out when we want to keep up such a level in excitement in the organization. I think it's something that we keep conscious of, but it's also it's easier to get folks to really hone that in and pull that in when we say, hey, we want you to have that level of commitment to organizations and community engagement. And I think that that's something that we really use because they don't even look at that as work. They actually get true value out of that. So maybe they're putting in, 50 hours a week, but 10 of them are really outside of the office that they're doing exactly what they desire. And I think that that's impactful and helps center them in. But I think I appreciate the the gratitude, but I think one thing just to learn from some of the stuff of why we want to pace so much is folks need to understand that you need to say yes more often. I think there's something from a leader perspective that you understand as you provide opportunities to folks that you'll continue to provide, and you'll ask, hey, you want to lead this, you want to lead this new office, you want to go do this thing. And then some folks will get really frustrated because they're not being provided those after a while. And you're like, well, you said no 15 times. So it kind of is one of those things that say yes more often. Don't be afraid to fail. Now, you got to be in the right organization. I think that that's really the thing that an organization needs to realize is let people fail, but embrace them and say, okay, fail fast, pull yourself up, go after it again. And I think that that's something that just an organization needs to understand is let people fail fast, but then help them right away and be there to really embrace them, to pick them back up and get them going back on their way. So,
Anything you want to add to that? Michelle, Natalie?
I think you nailed it, David.
Nailed it.
appreciate it.
Well,
Very good.
David, I think Terry heard your comment about what is your strength? Is it significance, I think, with the phrase? So
Yeah.
Good job, Terry. You were listening. Other questions from the audience here? Well, is there any questions you want to ask each other while we're up here? This is kind of a curveball, I apologize. But for discussion. Is there anything that you wanted
got
to
another.
touch on? Yeah, go ahead.
If you could only list one takeaway for today, what would it be? Biggest takeaway?
From this,
Yep.
say yes more often. So I'm gonna go back and tell my team. I'm gonna put your quote there, man.
I'm gonna try Michelle's RIP technique.
You guys were looking.
I want some feedback from my team, and I want them to practice hard conversations on their managers.
And do it once a week. That one-on-one, there is no substitute. It only takes 10
Yep.
minutes to
Just a
do
little
it.
rhythm.
You gotta do one on them too. They do you do them.
I like the RIP concept. It's cool, and I like that feedback. And I really like when any employee, when I'm having my lunch, and saying, what am I doing poorly? And I think that that's something everybody should ask. You know, it should go both ways. We need to provide them the support that they need. I love the 12 weeks, but that's because I like.
You do the seasons. The seasons is more provocative, I think.
Because it's just sometimes you get through a year and it's kind of like, okay, well, what happens next year? No, you all start over again. And then sometimes it's like, oh man, we got to do that again. So,
Daunting.
and it's a little bit daunting. So kind of creating that little bit smaller area to focus on.
And you know, if you do this RIP stuff, you guys, it gives you an excuse to do it. If you say, we have a format for a one-on-one,
Yeah.
rather than just saying, oh, what's going on with you? What's going on with you?
Yeah.
I use it as an excuse. I mean, I have a form. They have to bring theirs, and they give a copy to me, and I do the same for them. And we're just new to this, and it is hard. It's hard, but it's almost like having that template or format gives you the excuse to say it. You know, it's your turn to tell me some constructive, right? Boy, one guy gave me 3 in a row the other day. I about fell over. It was my new chief people officer and my new leader of HR, and I'm like, bam, 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 3 in a row.
We'll just do one.
Let's do one.
I don't know if you gave them the RIP, what the RIP is, Michelle.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I know. The P is the path forward, the I is the impact, and the R is just like this. It doesn't mean it's just like the statement. It's just like what it is. It's like either the compliment or the negative, but the impact. So if you say the R, I'm having a hard
Like
time.
response.
Is it
or
the reason? Yeah, it's something like that. I can't believe I don't remember that. But it's like in my case with the COO, it was, hey, you know, Michelle, you're making a lot of changes. That was the R. And the impact is people might not be able to sustain the changes because it's coming so fast. And that P, that path forward, is so important. A lot of times on the positive side, it's just keep on keeping on. But in this case, the path forward was let's stand down from this next, which they considered to be a really significant change. Plus, we were going to, do performance appraisals that in social services and some other industries, I think you always get the same increase. That's no good. If you're going to have a high performance culture, you do a pool of money, and somebody that nails all their goals and is doing everything gets the 6%. And if you're not doing so great, that's a message that you send. It's a lower raise rather than everybody. I'm sure you guys are doing performance management that's variable. That's my pet peeve. I cannot stand to think that everybody would get the same raise, because Johnny over here is not doing much, but Cindy's blown it out of the water. So that's our next big thing that's coming, but we're going to stand down for a while.
Well, hey, folks, give it up for our panelists today. Round of applause. Thanks to our platinum level sponsors of Avera Health, First Bank and Trust, First Premier Bank and Premier Bank Card, Mid-American Energy Company, Plains Commerce Bank, and Sanford Health. And thanks to all of you, both online and in person here attending. We really appreciate it. And we really thank you for everything. One last comment, good luck to the Rays tonight on what could be a very interesting game. Thank you.